Hey everyone, my name is Shovik. I am a GMAT Club retired moderator, Ross alum. I'm here today with Morgan, who went to a school who manages admissions for Fuqua, a school that I applied to 7 years ago. I had a lot of fun writing essays for Fuqua, and you're all going to talk about how to stand out as an applicant, best practices. But before we jump into all of that, Morgan, why don't you just go ahead and introduce yourself for us a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Morgan Griffin. I'm an associate director of admissions here at Duke's Fuqua School of Business. I've been here for 5 years, feels like 5 seconds sometimes. And so love what I do. I get to read applications. I get to travel. I help to manage some of our in-person events that you might have attended or will be attending or hope to attend. So we'd love to see you out there at those events. I also serve as the admission advisor for South Asian applicants, as well as folks in the Mid-Atlantic region as well. I spent 8 years living in Virginia. So Mid-Atlantic, DC, Virginia area is very close to my heart, but have loved spending time at Fuqua and love getting to meet with prospective students like yourselves to talk about all things application and Fuqua related. So happy to be here this evening.
Awesome. Seems like people already know you and they love you, so we share the feeling. Morgan, we have 30 minutes today, so I'm going to try to pack in as much as I can. I'm going to start with round one deadlines, coming up pretty quickly. What's your advice for folks who are just starting out, right? Like blank page versus people who have made some progress. Maybe they have had their first drafts in, maybe they have just started approaching their recommendations. So for those two segments, what's your top three advice?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people right now, applications have opened at, I think most schools now, I think I've seen all the emails come in of our app is live, and a lot of people are debating, gosh, do I apply early action? I think I always hear people say, like, oh, is that where you guys give out all their scholarship? Is that where you guys admit everybody? Am I too late if I apply in round two? And here's the thing, with any school you're applying to, Fuqua is not the exception here or anything like that. We want you to apply as early in the process as possible, but with a key thing, and that is when you feel like your application is the strongest. So if you are starting with a blank slate right now, and our first deadline is coming up September 7th, that's our early action binding decision. If you haven't started on your essays, haven't taken your standardized test score, and you're trying to cram it in the next like 2 or 3 weeks, I would rather you wait till round one or round two. But if you're somebody that, like you said, has done their research, they're ready to go. It's just kind of that anxiety of like releasing that application and hitting submit. Go ahead and submit. No matter what, we're going to admit people in early action all the way up through round four. As we are putting together the class, we know that there's going to be great applicants in those rounds, and some people just need a little bit more time to put their application together. And I would much rather someone spend more time on their application to make sure it is the best that it can be, rather than kind of cramming it together and there being mistakes and not putting your best foot forward. We really want you to shine in the application process. So round one is great if you're ready to go, if you've done your research, maybe you're just putting the finishing touches. But if you're kind of having some pause of like, I just don't feel like this is my best work, it's fine to wait for at least our round one, which is the end of September, or in round 2, 3, or 4.
Right. No, that makes total sense. I want to tell you that when I was applying to schools, I'm just a cynical person. I never thought that this is the strongest my application will ever gonna get, right? So at some point, I had to like, nope, this is it. I need to submit, right?
Exactly.
So lay it out for us. What are some of the green flags and red flags that you leverage when you read applications?
Yeah, so I think the biggest thing, and I think a lot of people when they're approaching the application, they're thinking of what is the person I need to be in the application. They're thinking, I was just talking to people and they're like today that were like, I'm not that, 5 years consulting business background. Like I come from a non-traditional business background. I haven't taken quant courses. I don't have 5 years of work experience. I think a lot of times people take our class profiles and think they have to shoehorn themselves into that is the ideal applicant. Far from it. Far from it. I tell people all the time, I really can't. An applicant does not come to mind that I feel like has ticked every single box perfectly of that class profile. So the thing is rather trying to shoehorn yourself into something that you think I want you to be yourself. There's been so much talk about AI and can you use things for, in your application. And the thing is we're going to know what's genuine and authentic because we're going to hear things come up in the interview and your essays and things. Be yourself. Tell your story, because that is what is unique about you. It's not always your test score or things like that. It is you, your unique story, your lived experiences, your essays. That's where your personality comes to life. So I think I'm really looking for someone who has a really genuine and authentic story that is true to themselves, true to what they value, shows that their part, can align with the Fuqua values. As you probably know, business schools, we all kind of have our own like unique personality and unique values that we hold, near and dear to our hearts. So do you fit kind of those, kind of ideals that we have, and just being yourself? I think also I love when people set up a chat with me or send me an email and say like, I've got a question. Like, I just don't know how to phrase this in my application. It is okay to ask for help when applying to business school. And it's okay to say, hey, I want to come to an AdCom person. Like, can you help me with this? I might not be able to give you the exact answer, but I can give you guidance based on what knowledge I have of working in admissions. So I think also like it's great to see people like reach out to others and ask for help. I think red flags are when there's a lot of mistakes in application. The instructions that are on applications, we did not just write them because we wanted to write lengthy instructions. They are there to serve a purpose. And so we are also looking like, can you follow instructions? So when people aren't following instructions, so going over a page limit, going over a word limit. And when I say word limit, like egregiously going over the word limit, and it's like very obvious just by looking at it. Mistakes. We know that you are most likely applying to more than one business school. It's completely fine. You want to keep your options open, but there's times where I see applications and we're reading it and I'm just like, this would have been really great if maybe you had changed the club names and the school name in your essay and not just hit copy and paste and submit. So not showing like genuine interest in the school, not doing research on the school. Business school is a huge financial and time commitment. You want to spend time researching the school. So if we're reading an application and it's very general, could have been written for any school, and you haven't shown genuine research in a school, it's really important. Not only for you, but for us to understand how are you going to contribute. So you could be doing yourself a disservice. The other kind of thing I see in applications is not filling out sections. Believe it or not, people do submit sections that can be left blank, and it only, I always tell people leaving a section blank is like not reporting your test score, not submitting your essays. So
Right.
kind of putting incomplete applications in is also another thing. It shows it was rushed. I think that goes back to if you're debating between early action and round one and round two, or any of those, go with the one that allows you to put the best application forward. To your point, you're going to be sitting there and you're probably going to be tweaking your essays nonstop. And at that point, you're just moving words around.
Yeah.
But when you've kind of are still working on really substantive things, take that extra time, take those extra weeks to really put your best foot forward.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to be able to copy paste a 25 random things essay from any other school. So I think you have a leg up there already. We're getting a bunch of questions. I'll get to them in just a bit. But you talked about, not trying to stand out artificially. So even though your classes have had like Olympic medalists, it doesn't necessarily have to be that way for everybody who is applying to school, which is awesome. So, and you have a very clear essay to actually show authenticity, which is the 25 random things, right? And that essay tripped me up. I know it trips many people up. And I'll tell you what happens. You're like, 25 random things, that's easy, right? So the first 5, really easy, right? Everybody has first 5 bar stories that they know really well, that they know how to say. 15, 16, things start getting really difficult. Is that essay one of your benchmark as a test of authenticity? What do you do with that essay?
Yeah, so I feel like you must have attended one of my sessions and heard me, because I give that same spiel of like the first 5 are great. You get to 5 or 6, 15 or 16, you're like, gosh, like, what have I done with my life? I've like run out of steam here, and you're just kind of like scraping the bottom of the barrel for the last few. The 25 Things essay was originally designed for our office as a way for us to get to know each other. So there was no motive of what did you have to include, but just a fun way to break the ice. And really, it's interesting because we still have this tradition of when you write your 25 things, even in the office, you share it with the whole office. And you'd be surprised. We pick up on things, and usually that person, I feel bad for them because they get a flood of emails. It's like, oh my gosh, I have this shared connection, and my sister lives in this state, or whatever it might be. It helps to form connections and community. And that is so important at Fuqua. So there's no trick to this essay. There is no, hey, it has to be this many personal, anything like that. You never know who's reading your application and what connection they are going to form. In fact, there was one person who I remember reading their application, and they had talked about how they did a study abroad in another country. And it was a country I had done a study abroad. And they had a very similar experience of when they got there, they didn't know how to speak the language or read it. And just how kind of scary it was getting out of like what you were used to living in the United States and going to this other country where, back when I did that, we didn't have cell phones or Google Translate or anything. Like it was, I think I still had like paper instructions for like how to get to my hotel. And I was reading that application and it just connected with me. And when I talked to that person, they said, that was the last random fact I put on the thing. And it was a throwaway fact for me. I said, really? Because that was the most impactful one on your list. For me, because you just never know who's reading your list. And so it's about forming connections. So we want those fun stories. Talk about your lived experiences. Talk about your favorite movie and why. I always get a kick out of, references to TV shows like Friends or The Office or anything. So it's really a chance for you to show your personality, and you don't get to show that in a test score or in a resume. So there's no trick to it. It's about you and your story, and have fun with it. And like I said, you never know who's reading your application and what random fact is going to stand out to them, because maybe they had a similar experience and you just brought back a great memory for them.
I think that's kind of one of the key highlights for me, because random facts are truly random, right? So you never know when it's going to vibe with someone and when it won't. So if it meant something to you, might as well, without assessing what it would potentially mean to a specific admission person, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So, I've been in GMAT club and just helping people. I've read a few Fuqua applications. I have one or two random fact pet peeve. I'll tell you one of mine, but I'm curious if you have a random fact that you have seen so many times that you're a little bit wary of it.
Gosh, a random fact that I'm weary of. I think like sometimes it's not so much a specific random fact, but I think when people write a random fact of, I like playing baseball, I like playing soccer, I'm kind of just like, oh gosh, but why? I think the more pitfall I see is just we're not really understanding why is that so important to you, and why out of really the hundreds of things you could have picked about yourself, that was one of your top 25. So I think that's more the pitfall, not the reoccurring one of like, I traveled to 5 countries. Tell me about your favorite country. Tell me why, not just a random fact of like, I've traveled to 5 different countries. We really want to know why. So I think that's more the pitfall I see versus like a reoccurring story I see.
I love I have traveled to 5 countries. I've seen that in resume and called them out. I've seen that in random fact and called them out. So I think what I'm sensing here, that it's perfectly fine to write about fairly ordinary things as long as you have a clear story of why they are extraordinary for you, which I think brings that point alive. I have a pet peeve of like, I think if you replace baseball by cricket, by the way, it's going to be a random fact in every single Indian mail application. So that's definitely going to happen. One of my pet peeves is like, I was a very curious child, and then like an anecdote, like to me, it felt like, oh, well, all children are curious. Tell me a little bit more about why that was specifically for you. These are great insights, by the way. So we do have a Fuqua essay deep dive session just happening next week. I see a comment on the GMAT Club chat about it. So make sure to attend that one. We'll do a lot more deep dive on the random things and other Team Fuqua and what do you bring to the community kind of essays. But I wanted to chat a little bit about you mentioning that you should wait till your application is as strong as possible, right? So you mentioned some clear benchmarks, right? Whether you have your test scores, whether you have, whether you have started at least, opening your portal and getting yourself in and things like that. But one of the things that I see a lot in the forums and when we do chats and things like this is there is a concept of diminishing returns when you're thinking about essays, right? And you can go on forever and ever. And for a lot of people, they're also trying to retake their test while they have a perfectly fine test score. So for all of these elements in this application, when do you know that it's time to hit submit? When do you know that it's time to go?
Yeah. So when I was applying to grad school not too long ago, it was interesting going through the process and working in admissions because it was the first time that I really was like, oh, wow, this is really what the anxiety feels like on the other side of the table
Right.
now. And it was really insightful for me to go through that working in this office. I think one thing is when it comes to test scores or even your resume, let's say you're planning on taking another test, but it's right after a round deadline, or let's say you get a promotion right after you hit submit your application. You can always send in updates and we will take those absolutely into consideration and put as part of your application as if it was when you submitted your application. I think when you are getting to the point where you are just, an application is never going to feel perfect to you. Mine never felt perfect when I applied to grad school and I got in. It's never going to be perfect and probably to the standards that you want, unless you've got like the best test score and the best job in the world and all those things. The stars have all aligned magically. And I've never seen that happen in an application. When you're sitting there and really you're just rereading your essays and all you're doing is changing words, I think that's a benchmark of like, just hit submit. It's going to be okay. If you're doing the same with your resume, if you are just scared, like, oh gosh, maybe if I just take the test one more time.
Yeah.
If you got a test score and, submit the application, you can always send in a new test score. I just say up until 2 weeks before decision release, it's like you could submit. So if you're like, hey, all I need is this additional test score that I want to submit, but the rest of my application is fine. Submit the application, submit the test score once you get it, and we'll take that into consideration. So I think when you're just really sitting there, just kind of almost in a way like finding that excuse to delay it, like hit submit. We will, if you have questions or you want to submit updates, that's fine. You can do that, but your application is great. And I think when you've spent enough time on it, when you've spent months on it, I think you're good to go. If you've only spent 3 hours on it, probably wait till the next round.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense to me. And thanks for mentioning that the option of actually sending in additional information as and when they come, that should not necessarily get in the way of you waiting for the next round just because you're waiting for another shot at the GMAT or you're waiting for a promo. We are going to move into questions. We have a ton to get through. There's no way we're going to get through all of them, but I'll try to pick, the ones that apply to multiple questions. But by the way, we are going to do a lot of MBA application walkthrough sessions, admission deep dives, and essay reviews in this week and next, and then the week after. So make sure to like the video. It helps with the algorithm so that, it gets recommended to more people and everybody can watch it. So subscribe to the channel, hit notifications, and we are doing sessions almost every day at this point, so you don't want to miss them out. So the first question that I wanted to take was for a specific essay. We will deep dive into essays, but I'm curious about top of mind thoughts. Contribution to Fuqua has been really important, especially with Team Fuqua being a big part of the culture. What are some of the ways that you think applicants can respond and that will resonate to someone like you?
Yeah, I think so many people immediately default to clubs. Like, I will be part of this club. And the clubs are great, don't get me wrong. And I think that the involvement of them, the leadership you get from that is incredible. I think when you're thinking of contributions, think of what lived or professional work experiences do you bring to the classroom. For those who maybe are coming from military backgrounds, you bring a lot of leadership that you probably aren't even aware of that you are going to bring to the classroom. People that come from Teacher America, Peace Corps, different organizations, you bring a lot of perspective. So I think when people are sitting there thinking, oh, I don't come from a traditional business background, okay, think of the great background you do come from and the contribution you're going to bring, because all the consulting people are going to learn from you because all they know is consulting. They haven't thought of nonprofit work, government work, volunteer work, anything like that. So I think talk about that. You can talk about initiatives you want to bring, maybe your involvement in centers or research or starting your own venture. So I think it really can be broad. When we're looking at students, we're not looking at people that are just going to come to Fuqua, come to class, get the grades, graduate, get the job, and move on. Part of going to business school is a lot of learning that happens outside the classroom and those contributions. So we want people that are involved. We're not saying you have to live and sleep and, eat, breathe Fuqua, but we want people to be involved. And that's the great thing about business school is the more you put in, the more you get out of it. And the more your peers get out of it too. You enhance the MBA experience. So think about the clubs, think about the type of experiences you bring. Some people want to start new clubs, and that's great too, but don't just use it as like, these are the 3 clubs I want to be part of and why, because I like cricket or I like consulting because that's what my background is. Like, we really want to see like, why is this contribution so significant that if you can only do 3 things, if you did these 3 things during business school, it would complete your business school experience.
One of the challenges that I've had on this essay is like, I want to do so many things. I'm only going to do this once, right? So, and business schools tend to have so many things. One of the things that I'd just like to throw out, I think your advice was fairly spot on, is talk to your resume twins, like talk to people who are going to Fuqua, who kind of sort of share the background that you share, and ask about how they spend their time, ask about how they contribute to the campus. Maybe you'll be inspired and go into a swim lane. But that's been super helpful for me. I'm getting a question. This is a highly specific question, so normally I wouldn't take it, but it also might help like other entrepreneurs. So if you have experiences that are not necessarily a formal work experience, maybe you have worked in an incubator, maybe you have had some experiential learning, how would you highlight that in either your resume or your essays?
Yeah, so you could absolutely put it as your resume. I would focus your resume on full-time work experience and those achievements and contributions you've had there. I think the essay we just talked about with the 3 contributions, maybe that's something that you'd like to contribute your experience of doing something to the classroom or to our new ventures clinic or any of our experiential learning opportunities. I think as well, what's nice about Fuqua is we have an optional essay, which usually can help to serve as like, hey, I want to explain why this test score was really wonky because my computer crashed or I looked off screen and it logged me out. Or, my grades weren't so hot when I was in undergrad because I was going through a personal situation, but my grades went up. You can also use that to be like, hey, there's things about me that I didn't get to share in my application. We also have like a lived experience section of the application now, where if there's something that's part of your lived experience, not like no so much work, but lived experience that contributes, that's another place that you can share that information as well. But when in doubt, the optional statement works really well. Just say like, hey, I also want to highlight, like, I have this, and this is something I would bring to the class, and it's something that is unique about me.
Right. Awesome. Yeah, that makes total sense. And you mentioned optional essay and like sometimes unusual circumstances, right? So reapplication is kind of sort of one of them. So applied in round 3, 2023, got rejected. How does Fuqua think about reapplicants? I think this one is especially interesting because when I talk to round 3 applicants, a question that they often ask is that, well, round 3, I just submitted my application in like March, and round 1 is in September. So my delta is only 4 months. I'm not a new person. Should I even do this, or should I wait for round 2, get a ton more accomplishments, and apply then? What would you say to them?
Yeah, so for someone that was rejected, and has worked, we're not expecting a completely different application, different goals, everything. Some of your application is going to feel exactly the same. For example, your 25 things probably going to be the same unless you want to rewrite them. We're not going to make you write another 25 because 50 things would not be in line with what we want, right? So I think for someone who is looking to put together their profile, if it's just a couple things you're changing, apply earlier. Like you've got most of the bulk of the work done. I think it would be, I would kind of raise an eyebrow if someone applied late in one cycle and then reapplied late again in the cycle. It would just kind of be like, what? And especially if there's not a lot of changes, it would be like, what was going on here? Unless there was an explanation, and sometimes there are valid explanations for that. But Fuqua is very reapplicant friendly. I used to have the statistic memorized, and now it has slipped my mind as I'm saying this, but we admit a lot of, reapplicants because a lot of times they do come back and they say, now that I've gone through the process, I have so much more awareness of where my pitfalls were. They've talked with students, gotten feedback, and they're like, I now see where I misstepped. And I remember there was one applicant I worked with a couple of years ago, and we had worked together on his first application. He ultimately did not get to come to Fuqua. He reapplied, and I remember when we were sitting and he had come to campus to visit, and he was like, I know what went wrong. I wasn't myself. And so on my resume, I started a board game club at work. And lo and behold, when I went in for my interview had started the board game club here at Fuqua. And there was that connection. And he said, I realized once I became myself and got that awareness and applied early, and you know what? He was admitted and has now graduated and gone on to an amazing career. So I think, reapplication is a very reflective process. There is an additional essay, but we are very reapplicant friendly. But right. I would apply earlier in the cycle versus applying late again in the cycle if that's where you kind of found yourself.
Awesome. By the way, I would just plug that I was helping someone that I knew from GMAT Club who applied to Michigan twice. This was their third time applying. He had very little hope. Not only he got in with like $50,000 in money, like in scholarship or something like that. Sometimes, I think in most cases there are opportunities to improve. But sometimes it's also luck. I mean, that it's just a subjective process, right? We are running, almost running out of time. This is a highly specific question, but I want to take it because I know Dipesh is where he is. It's 3 a.m. So I do want to ask this question. Data Analytics Club. So he couldn't find Data Analytics Club on the website, or people. Do you know where people can find DNA?
I think if we don't always have a club, some students, we can start a new club, or sometimes maybe that club is like a subset of like a tech club or anything like that. So sometimes it might not be that exact name, but certainly I think a lot of our student clubs each year, they're evolving. It's new student leadership. And I think that's what's so great is the club leadership and management is in the students' hands. So it might fall under the tech club. It might fall under another name. We have 60 clubs. So it's hard for me to keep track of like which one could this fall through. But I think that's a great thing about business school too, is if there isn't something for you, if you are willing to take an idea and run with it and manage it, like we are here to help support you, because that's what you're going to do in your career, right? You're going to find things and say, hey, I want to run with this and lead this. Same thing when it comes to clubs. The clubs are helping give you leadership experience. So
awesome. This is probably going to be our last question. So GMAT focus, new GMAT, GRE and things like that. When does that apply for Fuqua? But I would also, latch onto this question because I'm getting this a fair bit on the chat. Is there a score beyond which you shouldn't bother retaking?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, they put a lot of focus on the test scores. I get it. It's an anxiety-inducing part. It's the part that you feel like you have some control over when it comes to studying, and then zero control over when you get into the exam itself. So one, there's no like benchmark of like, this is a score we don't accept. We don't have an Excel spreadsheet that like sorts and we only view the top, 100 or so people or anything like that. So, and plus we accept the GMAT, the GRE, or the executive assessment. And we have people that are applying with different combinations of those. And we will be accepting the new GRE GMAT focus exam as well. So, we trust in those tests and how they're, evaluating it. And so we will be evaluating it the same way we evaluate any test. And so I think take the test multiple times if you can. Some people, they take a test and they score really high, and that's great, and kudos to them. Testing is not my forte. But some people, we do find a lot of people are taking the test multiple times and maybe take the GMAT, the GRE, the EA, whatever combo it is. But you are more than just your test score. We know that, and we look at all components of the application equally. That test score, I probably spend 10 to 15 seconds looking at. I spend much more time reading your essays, your letter of recommendation, your resume, everything like that. So take the test, and there's other components of the application where you can shine. I have denied people with 780 test scores. I have admitted people with 610 GMAT scores. So it really can be all about your whole application. So take the test, best of luck, but it is not the end all be all of your application.
So somebody asked, should I take another test if I'm only going to get a 10-point improvement? Probably not. That's probably not a great use of time. Cool. Last question, Morgan. Someone who is sanity checking their round 1 application next week or the week after for the early action round, what's your top advice on how to sanity check? How do they know when to submit?
Yeah, I think have somebody else that hasn't been staring at your application read your application, look through your essays. What I recommend people do is give someone you trust your essay. Don't give them the essay prompt. And after they read it, see if they can tell you what the essay prompt is. Have someone go through and just check for spelling mistakes. Did you catch everything? Go back through and read the instructions, because if your resume goes over that one page, that could ding you. So I think go back through, read the instructions, read your application. But I also realize, and from experience, you've been staring at your application for a very long time. Sometimes that fresh set of eyes catches those little things that you are maybe just overlooking because you've stared at it for so long. Your mind is literally blanking those things out. So read your application, take the time. Don't wait to hit submit at 11:59 because inevitably your computer will crash or something will happen. And so give yourself enough time to troubleshoot, submit your application, and continue to reach out to the admissions committee. Just because you hit submit doesn't mean you can't talk to us, you can't come to events. Still come to our events, still engage with students, still talk with people, still be involved. And ultimately, you still can send in updates. So the door is not closed. It's not a sealed black box once you hit submit.
That is such good advice. So guess what this essay is about. Guess what the question is. That is super, super important. I would also add that, as somebody who writes jargon for my day job, it's very easy to get lost in our own industry function and things like that. Mm-hmm. So giving your application to someone who has no clue about what you do is always a good stress test. Morgan, thank you so much for joining us. This was such an awesome session. I look forward to, we have an application walkthrough for Fuqua. We have essay review next week. So I'll be tuning in for that one. And thanks everybody for joining. We had 120 people watching live. This was awesome. And I'll hope to see you soon. Thanks.
Yes, thank you. Bye-bye, everyone.
Bye.